This is today's installment of 10-Minute Histories, and today I'm going to be talking about Erwin Rommel, the Afrika Korps, and a bit about colonialism in South Africa, because that's just where I know the most about, so I'm just going to be talking about that. Cool, and apologies, I'm in a bit of a rush today, so I'm going to do this in one go. Whether I and stutter a bit, I'm sorry, I'll just bear with me, please. Okay, so the reason I chose to spoke about the Afrika Korps and Erwin Rommel specifically is I'm just going to steal the words from someone else because they say it so much better than me. And this is Samuel Bradshaw, who is a second lieutenant in the 8th British Army, he fought against Rommel in the African campaign. And he said Rommel and the Afrika Korps brought great honor to Germany at a time in history when so many brought great shame. So during a time in history when, obviously a very difficult time in German history and history for the entire world, this is one part of the German Wehrmacht that brought honor to Germany. So Erwin Rommel he fought in the First World War, and he was decorated with the Pour le Mérite. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, it's a difficult word. And he didn't expect there to be a Second World War. His son was actually quoted as saying that when his dad left for the Führer's headquarters for the first time, he said that as long as the generation that remembers the First World War is still alive, there wouldn't be a Second World War. And obviously he was wrong, because for obvious reasons. And he was known from the First World War for leading from the front. So he was always ahead of his troops. He wasn't the kind of general that sat behind and just gave orders. He was there with the soldiers, and this earned him a lot of respect from his men and the men under him. So during the French campaign in the Second World War, he had control of a panzer division, and this suited his mobile style of warfare very well, and he had impressed Hitler. Hitler had read his book from the First World War, which was called Infantry Attacks, and he gave him the 7th Panzer Division, sorry for that. And he really made a name for himself in France, distinguished himself as someone who could really take charge and take command. So he was given command of the Afrika Korps, and this was after the French campaign. And the Afrika Korps was originally sent to Africa to support the Italians in their efforts. And Hitler had sent Erwin Rommel there because he knew this guy could get the job done. And Rommel's motto was sweat, not blood. And he, in the African campaign, became known as a desert fox. And the desert also suited his mobile style of warfare very well, because it's mostly flat, you can move vast distances. And this sweat, not blood, his motto just came from where he felt you would rather work hard than fight hard, do hard work and minimize casualties. And he described this war, the war in Africa, or the African campaign, as a war without hate. And this is from both sides, where British POWs were treated the same as German civilians. And he was known, Rommel, for bluffing. He actually had a few bluffs in Africa where he would, for instance, sorry for not phrasing everything perfectly, but for instance, he would drive his tanks around the block a few times. Instead of just once, he would drive them around numerous times, and it would make it seem like it's an endless division of tanks where it's really just a small division. And when he would move troops, he would get everything that's capable of moving and kicking up dust to move along with them. So they would kick up these massive dust clouds, and British observation planes would report massive movements of enemy troops in this direction, where mostly some of it was cars and jeeps and camels and anything basically that was able to kick up dust. And Al Alamein is where a lot of the action happened during this campaign, and it's basically, there's not much there, but it's Al Alamein was the only way to block the German advance to Cairo. And touching on Cairo, this is where colonialism comes into play, whereas in Cairo, where they thought Rommel was on their way, and Rommel had had success upon success upon success, when he reached Al Alamein, there were parades and pro-Rommel demonstrations and pro-German sympathies, because they actually thought the Germans were there to save them from the British. Because remember, this was still, most of these were colonies of Western nations, South Africa included. We were still under British rule. And there were two major battles at Al Alamein, and someone is quoted, one of Rommel's soldiers is also quoted as saying that he believes Rommel should be more highly regarded for his retreat, for pulling out from Al Alamein than and the Broek than for his advance there, because he saved so many lives, and Hitler had actually given an order that they should fight to the last man, and it was a fight that they could not win, not even with Rommel. So he actually went against his orders and retreated the troops, and he was able to save quite a few. Well, basically he was able to move the entire German army, and yeah, obviously this soldier believes, as I too, that he should be more highly regarded for saving those, and because obviously he would have been in a lot of trouble from Hitler. Sorry for that this is so going once and not rehearsed at all and nothing, but I'm in a big rush and time is a bit constrained today. But so he was promoted to a field marshal during the African campaign, and he really became a hero of propaganda, where he was used as something to distract the German population from the war in the East, in the Eastern Front, which was Russia's, where it was freezing, people were dying. The Germans expected the war to be over before the winter, and obviously it didn't end before the winter. So the Eastern Front was going terrible, and the African campaign really served as a distraction from what everything else that was happening. So he really was the Afrika Korps, and Rommel served as a form of propaganda to distract from the Russian front. And the images you would see from the Afrika front would be Lily Marlene. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Obviously these are French words. I presume it's a French word, but it's a song that was very famous, and it became famous during the wartime. As a musician, I'm aware of this song. I don't know about its origins though, but it was very popular during the wartime. And so the images that's kind of conjured up about the African front is Lily Marlene and eggs being fried on tanks, and these oases, and German soldiers chilling and relaxing with like the local Arabs, if I can use that word. I'm not sure if it's politically correct, but I did it anyways. And where this was contrasted to like soldiers frozen in Russia. Thanks for bearing with me today. It's a difficult one. So yes, as I mentioned, many in Egypt actually loved the idea of German occupation, because, as I said, they thought they would be saved from the British. And many colonized countries actually held these kinds of sympathies, and at the turn of the century, for example, English is my second language, so I wanted to say for example, and I almost use Afrikaans by voorbeeld. But anyways, so at the turn of the century, SA was still engaged in open warfare with Britain. So at the turn of the 19th century, so 1900, we were still basically fighting a war against the British. And Germany, during this time, had actually been the country that supported us the most. The Germans sent us Mausers and smokeless gunpowder, which was suited South African commando style of warfare and Boer warfare very well, where they would move in commandos and kind of move quickly, move secretively, and that's a different video. But smokeless gunpowder helped them out a lot, because you could fire and not be seen, where with gunpowder that makes smoke, obviously it doesn't need an explanation. You hear a shot, see smoke, and then you know where to shoot back at. So, and the Jameson raid, that was a very successful raid by the Boers. The German Kaiser sent Paul Kruger, who was our president. He sent congratulations to Paul Kruger, which obviously infuriated the British. And if I'm not mistaken, as far as I remember, the German Kaiser, this was Kaiser Wilhelm, was related to the British monarch in some degree. I'm not exactly sure if they were nephews or cousins or something like that. And in 1914 there was a Maritz rebellion, where members of parliament and factions in parliament and factions in the military rose up because they didn't want to fight with the British in the First World War. So already this is, you can see where if our country was scorned to earth, I think I'll do an episode on that as well, but there was a lot of hate towards the British because of their scorn to earth policy, which was very similar to, not similar, I'm not going to compare the two, but which is on par in my, stepping on dangerous because this is just my random thoughts popping out in one go, but you can compare it kind of to the Holocaust, the scorched earth policy in South Africa and concentration camps, and I'll try and do an episode on that as well, but have to rush this now because I'm really pushing time now. But in the 1940s there was the Osserver Brandwacht, so this is also Second World War time pro-Nazi, well not pro-Nazi, pro-German organization in the rise in South Africa, and South Africa actually only got our independence in the 60s. So 58 years ago we were still under British rule. My mother was still born under British rule, so there was still a lot happening where we weren't really our own country at that stage, and a lot of people still held a lot of animosity towards the German, not towards the Germans, towards the English. I think I'm just going to stop this one here today, guys, because I didn't have time to read my notes through, and it's going pretty badly in my opinion. Please tell me if it's not. Maybe this kind of natural flow that I've been doing with all my videos, one day I might consider like doing a few points cutting, if I do something terribly, just redo it, but we'll get to that later. Obviously I'm at this stage just doing it for myself. Maybe one day my kids can watch this and they can learn something from their dad or something. Yeah, who knows. So now going back to Rommel, sorry I kind of lost it there with colonialism, but I said I do want to touch colonialism as well. So Rommel was implicated in, I'm not sure of the date, but it was implicated in the bomb plot. It's a very famous bomb plot. There's a movie made about it, that Valkyrie, with the short guy Tom Cruise, so Rommel was implicated in those bomb plots. He wasn't a participant, but apparently he knew that this was going to happen, and the fact that he didn't spill the beans was enough that Hitler basically gave him an order to either commit suicide or to face the law, which would be, because for Hitler didn't want, obviously let's go back to like Rommel. He was a hero back home, like people idolized this guy. He was like the only guy bringing home good news, so to suddenly say that even this guy is against the Führer and Hitler would have been very counterproductive for Hitler. So he, in my opinion, I think he would have preferred Rommel taking the cyanide pill. So yeah, let's just end on that. Rommel was forced to commit suicide so you can just see again another puppet or a pawn in a regime where I think someone was very ill-informed. You get, again, I think it's that phrase you hear where it's a cult of personality, where someone gets so infatuated with someone. And from the beginning, I think, of German history, like post-World War I, the German military was basically forced to play with wooden guns and box tanks and things. So there wasn't really, for someone like Hitler to come and say, put away the toys, I'm going to give you real weapons. I think for a military man, I think the sense of duty also comes into here. Me, like I'm not in a generation that knows too much about duty, but I think if you go back to these times, especially if you think about Japan, every country that signed up meant to fight, women to fight, to work, to, it's a sense of duty I don't think you really have today. Not that I've seen, not that I've seen, I guess. So, but what I wanted to mention was, so for someone like Rommel, sorry, I need to end this, but someone like Rommel, to be so infatuated with someone, at one point he said that the fact that he's in Hitler's inner circle means more to him than his rank of general. And this is like a military man, and also like, I'm not a military expert, but I know these people who are like raised in these military setups are like, for someone like that to prefer someone above the institution, the military institution, I guess, just goes to show the powerful role this person had on him. And I think it took a while for Rommel to realize what really happened. And this, I think, really happened when Hitler told them to fight to the last man, and Rommel realized Hitler has no sympathy for them. So just sorry for this one being a bit wishy-washy, but it's a subject that's difficult to talk about and difficult to squeeze into 10 minutes, and I've already gone a bit over, but it might just be because I've been blabbing a bit about how different this is, and I see I have a little nervous twitch there with my hands. But luckily, hopefully I haven't been stuttering too much. I don't think I have, and I've been umming a lot, which I always do. But let's end this here. Thanks for listening, and that's 10-minute history. A bit on Rommel needs a lot more. A bit on the Afrika Korps needs a lot more. And you can go read up on Lily Marley and those songs and stuff. I think that might be interesting. I'll see if I can do, maybe from this one I can just pick a few more subjects to elaborate on at another time, but I'm going to upload this anyway. So cool. Hope this wasn't bad. First attempt. Bear with me, and thanks for listening, guys. Cool.